The way we consume news has changed a lot over the years. From newspapers to the internet, the style of storytelling has adapted to the medium as well. Now, it's happening again, this time with artificial intelligence. And it's complicated. AI is being used to write stories that flood the internet with trash and spam. But it can also help journalists tell stories that can be personalized and updated automatically. Throughout this series, we'll be featuring the stories of breakthroughs and other key moments in emerging tech, as told by those who witnessed them. I'm Jennifer Strong, and this is Shift.
Now here on the steering column is a device called Auto Cruise. You simply set the speed you want.
Self-driving robo-taxis are already on the road in US cities.
As the disk rotates, a mirror reflects the light in the way that depends on how the signal was recorded.
This is the 100 terabyte empty call. I present to you Electro, the Moto Man.
Ladies and gentlemen.
I would say that one of my greatest skills is my ability to interact with humans.
This episode, it's the latest installment of our oral history project.
I remember the first project that I did related to this space was actually in 2013. And now, more than 10 years later, we are seeing this emergence and innovation around the implementation of AI in newsrooms. And I think there's a lot of questions and considerations for us to explore. My name is Francesco Marconi. I'm the CEO of Applied Excel, which is an AI and computational journalism company based in New York City. Prior to that, I was the R&D chief at the Wall Street Journal and the AI co-lead at the Associated Press, so working at the intersection of artificial intelligence and journalism for quite a while. Well, the premise is that both technology and societal shifts drive and inspire new ways of doing storytelling. And so if we think about journalism, specifically when aspiring reporters go into journalism school, the first thing they learn about is what's called the inverted pyramid style of writing. But if you think about journalism before the mid-19th century, a lot of it was chronological, which is not how we consume information today. But then there was a significant yet gradual shift with the advent of the pyramid structure, and this was largely to the introduction of the telegraph. For those not necessarily familiar with the inverted pyramid style, it essentially prioritizes crucial information first, so the who, what, when, where, why, and it really transformed news reporting. That's how the vast majority of stories that we read today are structured. What's interesting about that, it was an adaptation to the era's constraints where brevity was really vital because of costs and reliability issues of sending this information through the wire. There's a lot of media research on the space, but it wasn't until much later, decades after the telegraph was adopted, that the structure gained widespread adoption in American journalism, at least. And so if you look at research, it was not only driven by technological changes, but also by societal changes that favored factual reporting over more interpretive narratives. And so this style of writing, the inverted pyramid, served by having more brevity and promptness in the communication of important facts first, and then lesser details following. So moving to a society that valued information that is delivered with much more efficiency. There are a lot of parallels with AI today and how we consume information, our expectations, and so on. So one thing to keep in mind is that the transformation of structure and stories, how they are conveyed, it's not just a stylistic thing. In fact, the presentation of information impacts how we as humans perceive the world and perceive the importance of facts and the relevance of information. So the inverted pyramid highlights the crucial details first, which is good for brevity and efficiency, but it can actually lead to a fragmented understanding by not providing as much context and depth, just because of the limitation. And also at the same time, we have to think about the way that people consume information, which is for the most part driven by social media consumption. And so the way that we write stories or that we distribute information, we have evolved to grab your attention as quickly as possible. So these are usually called, story hooks. And what happens with social media is that those story hooks inevitably get fragmented and taken out of context. So although the intention of the pyramid structure is for efficiency, the way that we consume information surfaces all of these issues of lack of context and partial information. And so with all of this context in mind, I think we'll need a new way of thinking about stories, something that is more concise, yet complete in itself. And so we were talking about the limitations of the telegraph, and that's why you had to be so effective in condensing as much information as possible. We also have to think about the limitations of AI, specifically language models that are starting to be used and adopted for story generation. Although at a completely different level, they also have limitations in terms of the computational power required and the costs and so on. And so all of this moves us towards another wave of how can we create more efficient ways of disseminating information, but at the same time that respond to the societal needs that truth is being questioned, accuracy, trust in media is eroding, social media distributes these parcels of information. So how can we use the tools of today, in this case AI, to regain some of that trust, to deliver information that is actually comprehensive? There are many approaches. One that I'm particularly excited about is this idea of thinking about information in a story at individual atomic components that can then be organized together and form a broader narrative. And so if you're familiar with how fractal structures appear in nature, in trees, in rivers, you can think about this idea of stories that are fractal, that have different branches, different ways of connecting to the core. That makes it more efficient. And so the concept of atomizing information is not new, as I mentioned earlier. For example, in 2008, the Associated Press conducted an anthropological study of news consumption and suggested that this atomic approach of news would actually be more effective in terms of comprehension and avoiding information overload and all of these things. But back then, in 2008, when this foundational study was written, the main obstacle was the manual production of these content experiences, because basically you're breaking down a story into all these different individual elements and treating those elements like, the facts, the quotes, the context, the backstory as individual units. So that required a lot of manual production, which was simply not cost effective. So now AI is changing that, where it can allow you to create that structure and create these stories that are live stories. So, and that's sort of another important thing to reflect on, which is we are going to evolve from stories being just these static objects to being living organisms that self-update as new information becomes available. So, in other words, the story itself is the new interface for interacting with the world, where you can now have these AI agents feeding data and updating the story dynamically as new information becomes available. Of course, this is not going to be applicable to all domains, but if you think about the experiences that we open a news article and we read that information and then basically we don't return to that article, if you will. So the idea of the atomic or fractal story is that the article becomes a live organism that is continuously looking for new insights to show you. If you're reading about some issues related to how environmental regulation will impact your community, you will see new updates coming into that story in terms of what did different people say about their regulation, or what's the projected environmental impact of a new regulation as new research or new data points become available. And so the same way that we expect apps and different tools to continuously improve, my view is that it will be a very similar experience. Not only this new information will become available, but also will be personalized to your areas of interest. And so we'll evolve from this notion of one-size-fits-all approach, where a newsroom writes a story and then tries to reach as many people as they can, to basically a bespoke information experience that is tailored to your needs. Not in the sense of, we talk about personalization and the inherent risks of personalization in terms of bias and creating information bubbles, but moving towards a different type of personalization that takes into account how information can be useful and relevant to your specific context. An important thing to discuss is also the tension between AI and how it impacts trust and integrity. In an age where there's so much AI-generated media, we are in a way blurring the lines between reality and fabrication. And so the authenticity of information is under scrutiny all the time. And so we are growing skeptic towards nearly all forms of media, including visuals. And so the risk of that is erosion in public trust, which is a big issue. AI will only accelerate that if we don't take the right measures and the right steps to use it in the proper context. And so information integrity is perhaps one of the largest challenges of our time, not just from a media or publishing industry, but for society at large. And so without addressing this issue, I think we can easily imagine a reality that is fragmented and distorted, and where opinions overshadow facts, and public discourse becomes fragmented, and business decisions get impaired because there's simply no trust. My background is thinking through how technology can help in the news gathering process. And if you think about it, for the last couple of or several decades and even centuries, a lot of the technology for information has been designed to optimize more volume of information, right? Because we were in, when journalism was invented, so to speak, we lived in an era of information scarcity. And now that has shifted. We are in an era of information abundance, data overload. And so rather than thinking about AI as a means to create more information in generating more content, we need to think about AI as a smart filter to help us, individuals and society and organizations, stay focused on what matters, and helping us dynamically verify information, which is the role of journalists. So I think newsrooms and the news industry in general have a very important role to play in this AI revolution, because all these workflows, all of this expertise that has been developed for a long, long time now can be adapted to technology. And I think human journalists have a very big contribution. And so if we think about how do we restore information integrity, there's a lot of interesting innovation in technology being developed from editorial algorithms, essentially AI agents that are able to discern if a new event or a new document that is filed publicly is relevant or not. There's programmatic verification essentially fact-checking and provenance. Where is this data coming from? And authenticity detection, is this AI generated? And so there's a lot of excitement and a lot of enthusiasm in adopting these tools for content and story generation, but I think we should be equally mindful regarding the potential risks and how to mitigate them.
This episode was produced by me and Emma Silikans and mixed by Garrett Lang, with original music from him and Jacob Gorski. Thanks for listening. I'm Jennifer Strong.
From PRX.